Our political commentators, Tim Hurdle and Lianne Dalziel. Kia ora korua, welcome.
Kia ora.
Good morning.
Tim Hurdle was an advisor in previous national governments. He worked in strategic communications, still does in fact, in advisory, and is also currently campaign director for the Auckland Mayor Wayne Brown's re-election campaign. Lianne Dalziel is a life member of the Labour Party, a former MP and Cabinet Minister. She ran as an independent for Christchurch's mayoralty in 2013. She was the city's mayor for 3 terms. She now regularly writes a column for newsroom.co.nz. Look, a lot of focus in the last few days, commentary pieces, think pieces on Christopher Luxon, Prime Minister Christopher Luxon. No one's seriously talking about a challenge to him, I don't think. But a lot of people saying, look, you've been running this campaign to turn the economy around. It's been the centrepiece of your pitch. Latest food stats are out. Unemployment stats perhaps could have been worse, but the underemployment rate is pretty poor. And the mood of business seems to be struggling as well. How are you viewing it all? Tim, are you seeing this as things take time, or are they running out of time?
They've got time. The economy is very flat, but I think there's a lot of information that's coming through now with the commodity prices improving and the monetary policy settings finally starting to cut through, which will give them some relief. I think the challenge, of course, is people always value their wealth due to the value of their house, and the housing markets are flat, so I guess that's a problem. And I guess there's a real winter gloom out there. You are hearing stories about the health system under pressure from record flu seasons and things like that. I think it's just a general gloom out there, and that's probably very much reflected in confidence in the government. So the government often wears it when people aren't very happy, and I guess that's probably the hope for Chris Luxon, is that the global economy picks up, or the New Zealand economy's underpinnings are really starting to come away, and he starts to see a bit of a shift in growth, and that will be reflected in the polls.
All right, his own personal popularity well down. How much do MPs worry about that? I mean, some of the speculation is if you converted the latest polls into an election result, some fairly senior people who don't hold a seat would be pretty worried about their place on the list, right?
Yeah, that's the big challenge they've got, because at the moment it depends on how you allocate electorate seats and whether you change any of them over, but at the moment they'd have no list seats. In fact, they'd be very close to an overhang situation where you have more electorate seats than the party entitlement. But of course this is all a snapshot in time, and it's really about where we're going to be in 18 months' time that's going to be determining the next government. I guess the challenge is where people forecast that's going to go in that next wee while.
Is it 18 months? We're in end of August.
It will be in October next year.
12, 14 to 16 months.
14 to 16 months, yeah, there you go.
You don't want to go too close to Christmas shopping, that's for sure.
Well, they can go right up to December, but yeah, it's often in November in New Zealand, so it's not unusual.
Okay. Leanne, how are you reading where things are at? And specifically for National and Christopher Luxon, when he has pitched his reputation, as the mergers and acquisitions guy, the guy's going to get the business done, the guy's going to help turn the economy around.
I think he's possibly considering or reconsidering whether labelling himself as a chief executive who can come in and fix the economy from a business perspective. I'd be rethinking that if I were him, in terms of the reality of running a country, and being in an environment, particularly the one that he's created with the sort of triumvirate of parties in this coalition, where so much has been preordained as the issues that are going to be placed on the table. So he's sort of suffering from 2 things. One is the economy. Obviously, that's something that he has asked to be judged by, and so he's not doing well in that regard. But then there are the other sidetracking issues, really, that are reflecting on him personally. Obviously the Treaty Principles Bill was much earlier in the year, but you've got, the pay equity changes, all of these other things that are going on at the moment, things that are promoted by individual cabinet ministers, but also by the individual coalition parties, and where he sits in that. So I think he's, I think still that national MPs will be sort of kind of watching the next few polls. I tend to look for trends rather than a specific snapshot in time, as Tim said.
Is he being crowded out, Tim, and how much of an issue is that going to be, including going into election year? This is the first formal three-way coalition. He made much of the fact that he negotiated it, but as Lianne says, a lot of stuff is locked in there, is locked in for smaller parties, and there does seem to be an element of crowding out.
Yeah, and there's quite a difference now if you can see New Zealand First hitting 9% in the polls, which is almost unheard of in this stage in the electoral cycle, that minor coalition parties in the government would actually still be, if anything, going up from where they were at the election. I think it also reflects the modern media environment where, with narrowcasting ability of the fact that social media means you can still appeal to the cohorts you're trying to connect with, they do get more of a voice. But he will be having the challenge that he'll have to find a way to cut through as the Prime Minister and show leadership and strength to really boost the national party vote, which is ultimately what he's judged on as we go into 2026.
Lianne,
actually, can I just comment on that? Because I think New Zealand First, Winston Peters, has played this perfectly in terms of the timing of his removal from the role of Deputy Prime Minister and then stepping back into sort of like campaign manager extraordinaire. And that is showing in the polls. There is definitely, there was method in the madness to go first rather than second.
What is extraordinary is not just that the government smaller party is as high as it is, but that all of them are above the 5% threshold. Te Pāti Māori, I think, might have slipped a little in these latest polls, but it's been close to that as well. That's the difference in this term.
Yeah.
Look, two things are going to matter a lot in terms of Christopher Luxon and National's particular fortunes. One is if these interest rate cuts do ultimately inject a bit of life into the economy, but it's got other headwinds, flat immigration being one of them, and nervousness in the employment market being another, affecting the housing market, as Tim says. But the other real matter, Lianne, sooner or later, Labour has got to come out with that tax plan. And how will that go down, particularly with those who are potentially the swing voters that both National and Labour are pursuing? When should they time that, Lianne? Should they get it out soon and give it time to be absorbed?
It's always difficult to judge these matters. I did think that when Jacinda Ardern was the Prime Minister, that I do think that she made a mistake in her time as Prime Minister, or during the first term as Prime Minister, to publicly state that there would be no capital gains tax at any stage while she was Prime Minister. I think that was very detrimental to actually having an intelligent debate about whether sources of income, essentially earnings off the increase in capital value of assets that you own, setting aside the family home, but looking at other assets that you would own, that there is that question of fairness that was never able to be really worked through at a time when Labour were in government on their own. And that 2020 period, now, it would have been difficult with COVID, but that would have led to a delay. But at least they could have had a serious and deep conversation, but it was just completely off the table. And I think that was a big mistake.
Well, we'll be talking to Grant Robertson tomorrow after 10 about the other matter that was a big call at the time after Hipkins took over, which was the wealth tax that he and Parker, David Parker had proposed for that year's budget. And it would have affected people on, I think, 10 mil, above 10 mil or whatever in assets, and brought tax cuts for others. That'll be a conversation for tomorrow. Now, the positions on Palestine and recognising...
Can I just want to say, though, sorry, just related to that, this is where I think the polls reflect the fact that people focus on the government in this stage of the cycle. If you look at the Australian election, when the discontent with Labor was confronted with the spotlight swinging onto the opposition, they were found wanting. And I just wonder how much, when we get into next year and people might be grumpy with how things are, the spotlight is going to go on Labor. The question is going to be, do you want to go with these guys? And that's where I think they were probably really missed an opportunity to clear the decks by going to the COVID inquiry, confronting that issue, and perhaps drawing a line behind that last government, because now next year they're going to have to front about why they didn't go to the COVID inquiry. They're going to have to front up about a big tax plan. This is going to be quite a challenge to sell in an election year. So this is where we might focus on the government at this stage, but I do wonder what will happen to Labor. They're actually riding surprisingly high in the polls considering where they came from at the last election, but that might come under challenge next year.
All right, well, let's pivot to carry our 10 o'clock cliche interview on. Let's pivot to that and come back to the Palestine question, which obviously is an important one from last week. But let's talk about that. I've mentioned Grant Robertson. He's one of four ministers, Hipkins, Verrill and former Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, who have participated with the stage 2 of the inquiry chaired by Grant Illingworth.
Both stages, actually.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
But the second stage is where they're not prepared to appear publicly. Let's pick up on that. Are you saying, Tim, get out there and let this be the last time anyone can come forward and ask these questions of you? Well, it won't be, but at least you will have been seen.
You drew a line under it. You said that we went and fronted up. This is why we did it. We made it for the reasons we made it, and this is our position, and this is why we did it. But now we're looking forward, and then you've pretty much put the issue to bed. Sometimes you have to put the issue to bed, and I think this just means we're going to have some sort of perception that they don't want to answer questions. So when people ask what's their credibility going forward, they'll still have to start answering questions about the past.
Your take on the decision not to appear publicly, Lianne?
Well, I listened to Grant Robertson yesterday, who described it as, potentially a show trial. And actually, when you look at what a show trial is, that's exactly what it looks like it would be to me. The thing is that what's the purpose of the inquiry? The inquiry is to develop carefully considered findings and practical recommendations based on lessons learned. But actually, they only want the ministers to appear publicly to enhance public confidence in the inquiry. Well, no, that's actually not why. They have all cooperated. All of the information that they have given will be public. To put them sort of basically on public trial,
that's not what a commission
in order
of
to have an
inquiry
effect on
is,
public
though.
opinion, it's not in order to find the truth, and that's the purpose of the inquiry.
Would they not have benefited from having, television and other coverage, and social media coverage? And I know this gets down to the editing, but good luck being a politician today if you think you're not going to be edited to suit someone's purpose. Would they not have benefited to have been seen visually to be fronting up?
That they may have, but it wasn't my call to make. The thing that I'm looking at is what is the purpose of the inquiry. I attended a coroner's inquest a number of years ago when one of the lawyers said that it was a court of understanding, not a court of blame. We look back to understand, not to blame. And it seems to me that if we want lessons learned, which is the purpose of the inquiry, then we need to analyse dispassionately what went right and what went wrong. The purpose of the trial or the public aspect of the hearings would be to put individuals on the line and specifically for what purpose? For the purpose of public confidence in the inquiry, not for the particular purpose of getting to the truth of the matter.
And Tim, this, from memory, the terms of reference for this excludes the period when New Zealand first was involved. It's in that latter point when Labour was in majority. But that's also, it had slightly different issues of controversy from the earlier period. I honestly,
I think there was a huge opportunity there for Labor to actually do, as I've said, make the case. I think you can underestimate how much New Zealanders are able to interpret and understand that people had to make decisions that they may have got wrong or that they regret in retrospect, but at least they made a decision, and I think that would have demonstrated that they were prepared to stand behind what they'd done.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was a huge political opportunity.
Back to your, well, two of them are out of politics now, aren't they? It may well be a factor, and the third one is probably still leading the opposition or leading Labour and thinking very hard about how he wants and what he wants to be used in next year's campaign. You mentioned earlier what happened in the Australian election. Part of what really took the Liberals out was that when they did start releasing policy, it was very late, it was very thin. Some of it seemed to be Hail Mary passes plucked out of nowhere.
It was untested.
So this brings back to my earlier point. Should Labour get what might be its most challenging policy out early and let it just become passé by the time of the election?
Yeah, I think they should. I think the thing about tax policy, it's very complicated. Often these CGT and wealth taxes have lots of caveats. People will ask questions around, is the family home excluded? What's the long-term implication? What are your revenue your pieces? This is where we see with modern legislation development, often it is put out through various drafts and iterations and working groups to get people to actually understand it, to means by the final time that we get there, we can understand why they've made the decisions to make a particular law. I think with something as complex as this, they benefit from that process because they can also refine it and improve it. But I think the problem they'll have if they drop it very late, will that it'll be opened up for people to just really pick the eyes out of it, and they'll be caught into a situation of defending a policy rather than actually promoting it.
All right. Now, I mentioned earlier the positions on Palestine and several nations moving to recognise Palestinian statehood. In fact, New Zealand now pretty much an outlier amongst many countries that we would compare ourselves to. That decision delayed to September. Let's focus first of all on the Prime Minister actually making a pretty strong statement, Lianne, and drawing rebuke from the Israeli representative as a result. Your comment on how he is fronting this issue of delaying a decision?
I think that he's faced with, again, some internal conflict, and I think there are senior ministers within the National Party and within the ACT Party potentially who strongly oppose recognising Palestine. It's hard to tell because people are sort of kind of deferring comment to the Minister of Foreign Affairs and to the Prime Minister, and sort of staying out of the thing. I just got the impression listening to David Seymour that there was a degree of reluctance within the ACT Party to proceed much further than they have gone so far, or potentially to put more conditions around the formal recognition. But I do think that he's in a difficult position because he just doesn't seem to be with the public in that regard, because watching night after night after night, the children and the people, the innocent lives that are being destroyed, just as Gaza is destroyed. It's become unbearable to watch, and you can imagine how unbearable it is to live through or not to live through, and yet we're not giving the recognition to Palestine that then puts pressure back on the state of Israel.
Well, it's also about trying to protect that potential for a two-state solution.
Correct. Which
is
seems less likely all the time when you hear further and further about intention with respect to Israel's position on Gaza.
What is the point of delaying till September, Tim? Is this a process whereby Cabinet needs to agree?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure that the New Zealand Cabinet's going to be incredibly influential on what the final outcome is, though, is it? I mean, this is a domestic discussion about where we position ourselves, but the ongoing conflict in the Middle East never seems to end. So I guess this is where we're going to get to. Well, then
come out and say we're not doing it. What's the point of hanging around till September on this decision?
Because I think we're always trying to be a good actor in the.
You just look weak,
diplomacy.
don't you? You just look weak and indecisive.
Yeah, I'm not here to explain the government. I think, as Leanne's analysis is correct, they're dealing with internal discussions and positions and trying to reconcile that against what is an incredibly complex issue. You've still got hostages there, so people are not seeing the end of that. But then you've got all these humanitarian issues and the various ongoing conflicts. So how do you unpick that and pull that together without offending anybody? I don't know how you'd ever do that.
How did Chloe Swarbrick played it last week? Made a, impassioned speech, got kicked out of the House by the Speaker for telling MPs to get a spine, or saying if we can find enough opposition MPs with a spine. Should she have left it there, Lianne? Should she have continued the way she did? Your take?
The response of the Speaker I was surprised at. I've been in Parliament. I have been asked to withdraw and apologise. I have refused to do so. I have been asked to remove myself from the House for the day. He kicked her out for a week. Now, I do not understand his reaction. I've read a lot of stuff about the use of the language, 6 government MPs to find a spine, so that we can stand on the right side of history, she said. There's been a lot of discussion about unparliamentary language and that it doesn't fit within the definition of unparliamentary language. But actually, all the time that I was in Parliament, it was considered a personal reflection, which is the other side of that same coin, to imply that a member lacks courage and it is out of order, all members being honourable members. So what she did was technically a breach of the standing orders as a personal reflection. But she didn't make that personal reflection against a National Party MP or all National Party MPs. I don't know why the Speaker took such umbrage at it. No one stood to take a point of order on it, as no one did against John Key when he said that the Labor opposition didn't have the guts to do something. So
should she have left it there,
I just
Lianne?
think we
because
should.
What then happened is, by coming back the next day and getting turfed out again, the argument was that...
I cannot for the life of me understand why she was kicked out for
Okay.
a week. It was an overreaction by the Speaker. If he'd asked her to stay out of the House for the remainder of the day and to return the next day, she would never have been asked to stand, withdraw and apologise.
Right. Your take, Tim, should she have left it unfair as it might have been perceived, or carried on as she did?
Oh, I think this whole thing becomes now we've now got the situation where the House is just a place for people to film social media clips. It seems like, and that's why these sort of incidents get to our attention, but the actual substantive debate doesn't get recorded. It's a bit of a shame. I guess she's very much campaigning to her constituency with her statements and comments, and she would have probably been quite happy with the controversy because it gets more hits.
Last sailing of the Aratiri today, and we're also learning how much cancelling the IREX project cost. 144 million, I think, is the figure I've got in front of me. Of course, the Minister, Finance Minister, no doubt, and certainly the now Minister for Rail and Ferries would say, well, we've saved 4 billion, but Lianne, as a mainlander, we still don't have a lot of detail, do we, on what and when and how?
Well, we regard this as part of the state highway network. So if we don't have ferries crossing over, and I do agree with this minister's position that it must be rail enabled, it was pointless to pursue an option that wasn't. It's ridiculous to think that people would put things off trains and onto there and then reload the other side. So I just think that the rail enabled was absolutely core critical. But yes, it's difficult to know exactly what's coming when, and there has been an enormous cost involved. And I think that we as a country, like many other countries, I have to say, we're not unique in this, need to be doing better when it comes to strategic planning around these major capital spends.
Have they got time to maybe come up with a solution that doesn't end up costing more than the original, or deliver something?
They have. But I mean, there won't be rail-enabled freight on the strait for 4 years now until they get those new ferries. So they'll have to restart that business if they have any. Most of that business just dropped away after the Kaikoura earthquakes, never came back. So it's really interesting to see how we deal with this issue as we move into the next generation of freight and transport.
Again, for the future. The future catches up on you eventually, though, doesn't it? Thanks both very much. Tim Hurdle, Lianne Dalziel.